Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. En français, en anglais? English. Okay, in English. So we continue our reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, The Price of Fare.
Qui c'est qui comprend pas l'anglais? Personne? Tout le monde comprend l'anglais? Je comprends l'anglais. Ok. Il comprend pas, nice. On a besoin d'une traduction. Tu veux bien traduire en français, s'il vous plaît? Vous savez pas.
So the price of fare. Donc on se trouve à New York au tout début du mouvement. So we are in the middle of New York at the very beginning of the starting of Krishna consciousness in America. And Srila Prabhupada created the first, let's say, center in the core of the New York City. And Gadgamuni was one of the first. There were two brothers, Ramananda and Gadgamuni. They joined together. And because they were one of the first to be engaged in service of Prabhupada and his mission, Gadgamuni was like Gagamone. He was the treasurer. He was in charge of the dispatching the money here and there. And at this time, money was not so easy to get. Some devotees were working outside and giving the salary for maintaining the matchless gift and the little team, the prashad, the little preaching going on here. It was very tight for the money and tight for the room also. So we are in this context, and here we see that Mr. Price is an estate owner and also a businessman who is expert in all kind of affairs and money investments, and he was a person that was not clear, and Prabhupada gave some hints before, when we go little page before, and there's a Bengali saying, too much devotion denotes a chief. And this Mr. Price was a little too much devotional for the West at the time. Prabhupada, it is said here that he used to address Srila Prabhupada as Your Excellency, and that address only alone had made Prabhupada distrust him. So it happened that Srila Prabhupada went in San Francisco to develop the little center here, over there, and the devotees were left on their own in New York. So they were discussing about acquiring something and putting some money in deposit in order to secure the sale with this Mr. Price, especially. Although Srila Prabhupada's disciples usually surrendered to his direction, they seemed bent on listening to the business promises, even though their spiritual master had cautioned them not to do so. Prabhupada became disturbed. His preaching in San Francisco was being threatened by fears that the businessman would cheat his society of what he had begun in New York. With no responsible advisor to turn to, Srila Prabhupada sometimes discussed the problem with Mukunda and other devotees in his room. They all agreed that the transaction seemed highly irregular. Brahmananda was probably being led on by false promises. Brahmananda, however, saw Mr. Price as a rare person, a successful man who wanted to help the devotees. Although no other respectable businessman had ever shown interest, Mr. Price listened and sympathized. And he would greet the devotee with Hare Krishna. Brahmananda was well aware of the humble economic and social position of the devotees. They were almost all ex-hippies and they were poor. But here was Mr. Price, a wealthy man with diamond cuff links, who was always glad to see him, shake his hand, pat his back, and speak appreciatively of the religion of India and the moral behavior of the small band of devotees. Mr. Price had received a group of devotees as guests in his apartment and said nice things about each one of them. He had said that Hayagriva was an excellent writer and that Back to Godhead was the best magazine on the market, and that its mimeographed appearance made it look even better than the slicks. He said he would give the devotees a movie projector, and he came close to saying that if he could liquidate some of his money, he would give them the building. Brahmananda, who saw Mr. Price a few times a week, would come away intoxicated with high hopes. The Krishna consciousness movement could rise to success through this wealthy man's patronage. After leaving Mr. Price's office, Brahmananda would rejoin the devotees in the evening and tell them all what had happened. On nights where there were no public kirtans, the devotee would hold meetings. Swamiji had named them Ishtagoshtis, to discuss the instructions of the spiritual master. And the Ishtagoshtis became dominated by talks of Mr. Price and the building. One night, Brahmananda explained why he had given Mr. Price $1,000. Mr. Price had asked for something to work with. It was like earnest money, and it was also for a trip Mr. Price had to take to Pittsburgh to see whether he could release one of his wealth to use in Krishna's service. One of the boys asked whether there could be any receipt or written agreement. Swamiji had told them to use receipts, at least amongst themselves. Gargamuni and Satsvarup as treasurer and secretary, signed every voucher, and Gargamuni kept the vouchers on file. These included requests for items like 50 cents for a hat and $3 for sneakers. Brahmananda said he had mentioned a written statement to Mr. Price, but hadn't pressed the matter. Anyway, it wasn't necessary or even desirable, since they were not simply conducting business with Mr. Price, but cultivating a relationship. Mr. Price was a well-wisher, a friend, who was helping them as a charity. He was going to do big things and use his influence to get the building. This $1,000 was just a gesture to show their interest and to show Mr. Price's friends the devotees were not joking. They had some money. In fact, the devotee had $10,000, $5,000 in small donation and $5,000 donation from a wealthy hippie. In addition to donation, the temple had a regular monthly income of $800. Brahmananda's $400 paycheck from his job as a substitute teacher from the New York City public school system and the $400 paycheck Satswar earned as a case worker for the welfare department. But the devotees were in no position to buy any building, and they knew it. All the more reason, Brahmananda explained at Ishtagoshti why they had to depend on Mr. Price. After all, he reasoned, Swamiji himself had inspired them to look for a $100,000 building. Quite an amount. Swamiji knew they couldn't pay for such a building except in some extraordinary way. And Mr. Price, Brahmananda figured, must be the way. Swamiji wanted the building. No sooner had he reached San Francisco that he had written back, I am very anxious to hear about the final decision of the house. I wish to open the house by the 1st of March 67. An arrangement may be done dexterously in this connection. The assembled devotees listened to Brahmananda's explanation, sympathized, and added their own understanding of how Krishna and Swamiji were working. There were a few contrary remarks and opinions, but basically everyone agreed. Brahmananda's dealing with Mr. Price were all right. When Kirtanananda and Roy Ram returned to New York from San Francisco, they consulted with Brahmananda. Then Brahmananda went to Mr. Price, who promised that if somehow they couldn't get the building, he would return at least $750. The balance of the money represented travel in the devotees' interest. But they will get the building, Mr. Price assured them. Then Mr. Price told Brahmananda the latest. He had found a wealthy financier, Mr. Hall, who had almost agreed to pay the full $100,000 for the building. Mr. Price was working on Mr. Hall, who happened to be his close friend. Prospects seemed good, but the devotee would also have to do their part, Mr. Price explained, by putting up $5,000. Mr. Price would then arrange everything else. So Mr. Price set up a meeting with an architect on Park Avenue, and soon Brahmananda and Satsvaruk were sitting with Mr. Price and his architect friend, reviewing sketches. To give the building that authentic Indian temple look, the architect proposed a facade with arches and, if they liked, domes. It was wonderful. Of course, they didn't dare ask him how much it would cost, but Mr. Price even hinted that the work might be done free. After Mr. Price served himself and his architect friend some liquor and offered some of the boy, although they knew they would not accept it, the two men held up tinkling glasses, smiled, and politely toasted themselves and the boy, saying, Hare Krishna. So we can see how, to this pastime, actually enemies of the movement are sneaking in the movement and really disguise themselves as Krishna's friend. But still, you can see that there is some details that one should scratch his head about, like Prabhupada with His Excellency. This made Prabhupada doubtful, but not Brahmananda. But here, the fact that all Mr. Price arrangements were made with friends didn't make them doubtful, because it was like a business plan and the devotees were part of it, really. And when they drink liquors like that, all together, it's a bad sign. The devotee didn't put themselves in front and we have some food, we have some drinks for the occasion, and take place. No, they took the opposite side, and it was Mr. Price and his friend who presented the thing, and the devotees were a little covered by some illusion, and they could not recognize how all this was tricky, actually. So sometimes there is situation like that in a devotee's life, where there is like a kind of conspiration. Because after all, conspiration is existing everywhere, in all kind of affair in this world, be it in between the animals, be it in between nations. You do something and you do opposite under the table. It is so common up with our government, the West, the East, everybody does that. But some are really specialized, really, really special police, special tuning for arranging cars or explosive or destroying people who are obstacle in what they want to do. Some are really expert in this, and in this field. And we can see that the devotees, they sometimes have to meet this kind of people also. And it makes it difficult for them not to be tricked, because we regularly see in our society that some devotees have been cheated. Not just 50 years ago, but 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It happens sometimes in our movement that some people, they get cheated. In spite of all precaution with Lakshmi, to be secure and use only on the service of Lord Krishna. Because after all, we are living in a world where practically the ambience is topsy-turvy, and people are why they are in the material world. It's because they just are flatly averse to the devotional service offered to the Lord. Because they are allergic to serving Krishna, they are placed in a atmosphere where it is convenient for others to partake the same mood and try to exploit nature for their own benefit, and they completely forget the spiritual tendency to serve the Lord. So the devotee have to do a lot of endeavor to get rid of this subtle cover, false ego, we call ahankara, that makes them feel averse to the devotional service. And it happens that in our devotional service we feel some allergy to serving Krishna, and we feel a distaste. Sometimes we feel that. So we must understand that some waves of the false ego are subduing us, and it's a kind of very subtle illusion because it overpowers intelligence, mind, senses, everything. So Krishna says with practice and detachment, you can make it, control the mind, and eventually dissolve the false ego, this false tendency to want to overload the material nature and to serve ourselves in place of serving Krishna. While going down on the elevator, Mr. Price spoke eloquently of the devotee's faith in God. He said that others might argue about the existence of God, but the most convincing thing was the devotee's personal experience. Your personal testimony, Mr. Price assured them, is the best argument. It's a very powerful thing. The boys nodded. Later, among themselves, they laughed about the liquor, but still they figure this man wanted to help. When Srila Prabhupada heard about the latest developments, he did not share his disciples' optimism. On February 3rd, he wrote Gagamuni. I had a talk with your brother Bharamananda yesterday on the dial. I am glad that Mr. Price had promised to return the amount of $750 in case no sale contract is made. But in any case, you should not pay any further more than what you have already paid, either to the lawyer or to Mr. Price, unless there is actual sale contract made. It appears to me very gloomy about the transaction because there was no basic understanding before the payment of $1,000, either to the lawyer or to the real estate. This is not businesslike. Unless there is a basic understanding, where is the way of transaction? If there was no basic understanding, why so much waste of time and energy? I cannot understand. As if there was basic understanding, why is it changed so quickly? I am therefore perturbed in my mind. When there was no basic understanding, what was the need for appointing lawyer? Anyway, it is my advice that you should consult me before issuing any further money. But I hope you will make the transaction successful without further delay. End of letter. Here Prabhupada, so we can see how Prabhupada he was not in the illusion. He was aloof and in a way was not entangled with the discussion with Mr. Price and like that, like Baron was. He was aloof and he was like a spectator on the whole transaction, and he could see that there was some irregular arrangement being made and nothing tangible, no paper, no everything in the air like that, you know. So Prabhupada was a real businessman. He could understand that something was not clear. He had some really heavy doubts. He had experience in the business because he had been done that in the pharmacy field when he was younger. Srila Prabhupada had also instructed Ganga Muni to protect the $10,000 in the bank and never withdraw anything that would leave a balance of less than 6,000. Prabhupada had left one account for which the devotees were the signers, but he also had an account for which he controlled the funds. He now asked the devotee to put $6,000 from their account into his. He wrote Brahmananda, "These $6,000 will be transferred forthwith by me as soon as there is a sale contract for purchase of the house." So we can see that practically Prabhupada made some security transaction so that he could control more the money in case of something bad happened. He had serious doubt about this transaction, up to the point of securing an amount of money so that the devotee would not be tempted to spend this money for the transaction unless it was really safe. So he just basically ordered the money you are managing, the 10,000 that you are managing, you separate, you take 6,000, you put in my bank so that I control, and you get only the control of 4,000. On February 10th, Prabhupada wrote to Kirtanananda, "Regarding the house, I was correct in my remarks that there was no definite understanding. In such negotiations, everything is done in black and white. Nothing is being done in black and white, but everything is being done with faith on Mr. Price. Let this understanding be completed within the first March of 67 and close the chapter. I think this is my last word in this connection. You are all grown up boys, and you use your discretion, and you can now complete the transaction without prolonging it indefinitely. If, however, we are not able to purchase a house, it does not mean closing our activities at 26 2nd Avenue. So there is no question of packing up and coming to San Francisco." So here Prabhupada is becoming a little worried about the whole story, because he's seeing that it takes time and nothing really serious. He speaks 2 times about black and white. He wants to see something tangible, a paper, something that he can have trust and faith and build something else, not just conversation, rumors, discussing, ishtagosti going on for weeks and months and all that. So that's what he's saying here. He is gently speaking to the devotee, "I'm fed up with all this transaction. Just do something serious with a paper, and we'll see on 1st of March. You are all in between them, you discuss, you do something tangible, and we see on 1st of March. But he's forcing, if nothing works, don't leave the temple. Continue with your preaching. That's the main thing. If you get the paper, you do get nothing, don't worry, continue your activities at 26 2nd Avenue. Then on February 15, Prabhupada wrote Satsvarup. So far I can see from the correspondence of Brahmananda, it is not possible for us to get the house for so many reasons. The main reason is that we have no money to pay cash, and nobody is going to invest cash in that house because it is neither complete nor has any income. It is simply utopian to think of possessing the house, and Mr. Price is simply giving us false hope. You are all innocent boys without any experience of the world. The kuning world can befall you at any time. So please, be careful of the world in Krishna consciousness. When Krishna will desire, the house will come to us automatically. So here, Prabhupada is giving his conclusion to another devotee, Satsvarup. He's already seeing in advance that they won't get the house. And he's seeing in advance that the kuning world, that they are dealing with a kuning individual. He's using the word kuning world for kuning people also. So he gives an advice for the world of the devotees in general. So please be careful of the world in Krishna consciousness. We are not aware of so many danger going on here and there, because in the temple or the community we live in a kind of protective bubble. In a bubble, can't say une bulle, hein? C'est ça, bubble. Where you follow the program, you do your service routinely, you have good association, good company. Generally, there's no chiefs, it may happen, but generally there is no chief. There is some errors, there is some mistakes. Some people, some devotees are in the clouds, they burn something, preparation, some little stuff. We become sometimes fighting with this devotee, this misunderstanding. These are actually on the scale of the planet, it is so trifling, so insignificant. But we make it a big affair because the mind become tricked by the mind. We don't realize how the tricking is going on the world on a cosmic scale. Why? First of all people are being tricked by thinking that they are the body and they have to work like asses for the body. Metro, boulot, dodo, Paris, You don't imagine. It's like in Paris, the metro is like in Navadvip a day of Gopuning. It's a flood of people. You have to do the queue to have access to the wagons. And sometimes you see 3 wagons going away, and before you are close to take the. So imagine the time you spend for going to work and coming back. And in the while you are being robbed of your money or your mobile, or women are being touched, or people are being pressed and oppressed, and you get infected by this virus, and so many things. And there is chiefs here and there It's really hell, becoming really hellish. So the devotees are not aware, really, unless you do Sankirtan and you are dealing with the people, giving the books to them, and you understand how the downtown it is really a pressure cooker. Unless you do that, you are not aware really of the reality and how the money is being scratched by the politician, by the chiefs, by these governors, by the family sometimes. All people are fighting in between themselves. It's like in the jungle when the animals have to feed themselves. It's a fight everywhere. Just in the city, it looks more distinguished, more polished, more electromechanic everywhere. Everything nicely arranged, but sometimes it is not arranged and it becomes a big mess for the people. The same basically activities of the animals, but in a polished and sophisticated way. But basically the mentality is more or less those of the animals in the jungle, survival. So here in this situation we find someone who is in this field of activities, and we call them sharks. Financial sharks. They exist, and they are very wealthy and very powerful, and they have a lot of influence, not only on the small fishes like the devotees, but on the world scale of a state, towards the president. With money you can put anyone in your pocket, especially in Kali Yuga nowadays on the West. So here, Prabhupada gives this general advice to the devotees in general. Please be careful on the world in Krishna consciousness. When Krishna will desire, the house will come to us automatically. And indirectly it will be presented in a clear way, not in a blurry and tricky arrangement that that you can understand that some tricky and gloomy people are behind. Because that's if they are tricky, they have tricks like that. Srila Prabhupada's doubts were confirmed when Mr. Price wrote to him asking for money. If Mr. Price had no such money, Prabhupada reasoned, why was Mr. Price asking him for money? On February 17, Srila Prabhupada wrote to Mr. Price to impress upon him that there would have to be a sale contract before ISKCON could actually purchase the building. Donc ça c'est la lettre. It's the letter here. If there is sale contract, my students here and in New York will be able to raise the fund very seriously. In the absence of any sale contract, everything appears to be in the air, and Mr. Tyler or his lawyer can change his word as he has already done. So maybe I finished the chapter. Yeah. Or there is any question or commentary or something? What do we do? We finish the chapter, there is 2 pages, or we stop now? Okay, Srila Prabhupada's message was clear. Brahmananda, however, complained of poor communications. Things were always changing, and Brahmananda wasn't always able to get Swamiji's confirmation on the latest changes. Swamiji would write his instructions in a letter, and although the devotee had to obey whatever he said, the circumstances would often have changed by the time they received the letter. Swamiji would also sometimes change his opinion when he heard new information. Sometimes Brahmananda would call San Francisco and Swamiji wouldn't be available. Brahmananda didn't feel right about sending messages through the devotees in San Francisco because he knew that the devotees were very skeptical about the whole transaction. If New York got the building, San Francisco would have to donate $1,000. And the devotees in San Francisco, of course, had their own plans for how to spend money for Krishna. Mr. Price suggested to the devotees in New York that maybe the Swami didn't understand American business dealings. With all respect, His Excellency couldn't be expected to know all the intricacies of finance in a foreign country. And His Excellency's request for a purchase contract was, as Mr. Price put it, something that went out with hoop skirts. Something that went out with hoop skirts. C'est une expression anglaise qui veut dire, quelqu'un connaît? Hoop skirts. Something, somebody know? No American here? Hoop skirts, c'est des jupes courtes. Brahmana Satsvarup didn't know how to reply. The remarks seemed like blasphemy. But Brahmananda Satsvarup were already entangled in the promises Mr. Price had given and went on meeting with him. They would meet with Mr. Price and then ride back to 2nd Avenue in the subway, chanting Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada wrote almost daily to various devotees in New York. On February 18, he wrote a letter to Brahmananda with the word confidential typed at the top of the pages. Now, if you think he is able to secure money for us, if you think that there is something hopeful by the time, then you can continue the negotiation as he is doing. But do not, for Krishna's sake, advance a farthing more on any plea by him. He may be trying his best, but he is not capable to do this. This is my honest opinion. While trying to avoid further losses in New York, Prabhupada continued his active preaching in San Francisco. Mukunda and the others were lining up lots of engagements, and the reception was often enthusiastic. In the same confidential letter to Brahmananda, in which Prabhupada put forward his strategies for negotiating with Master Price and company, he also wrote glowingly of grand successful meetings at various Bay Area colleges. The meetings were similar, he said, to the wonderful kirtans in Tompkins Square Park. This was a way to spread Krishna consciousness, not by becoming entangled with treacherous real estate agents. Here is a letter. I'm enclosing herewith a copy of the letter received from Himalayan Academy. See how they are appreciating our method of peace movement. So in this way, we have to forward our cause. No businessman will come forward to help us on utopian schemes as contemplated by Mr. Price. We have to try for ourselves. So the summary is to obtain a high purchase sale contract from Mr. Tyler and popularize our movement by outdoor engagement as many as possible. Srila Prabhupada had done what he could. The boys were foolish, even to the point of not listening to him. But they had raised the money themselves. If despite these instructions they lost it, what further help could he give? So he simply went on with his San Francisco preaching and advised the boys in New York also to become convinced of achieving success through kirtan. Shri Prabhupada ki, Shri Prabhupada Lilamrita ki, Guru Premanande.